The Las Vegas Raiders are walking away from the 2025 NFL Draft with plenty of praise, and for good reason. From standout selections like Ashton Jeanty, widely considered one of the best overall players in the class, to Charles Grant, a player many thought could have been a first-rounder. Had he showcased his talent at the Senior Bowl, the Raiders struck gold. Landing Grant at the end of the third round was a steal, and several later-round picks also bring intriguing upside. But not everyone is on board with every decision. One of the most talked-about moves was the Raiders' second-round selection of wide receiver Jack Beck. Some have called it a puzzling choice. According to ESPN's draft analysis, insiders and scouts around the league weighed in on the biggest head-scratching picks of the draft, and the Raiders' decision to take Beck in the second round made the list. Jeremy Fowler, a respected NFL insider, reported that several scouts believe the second round was too early for Beck, suggesting the third round would have been a more appropriate range. Here's why that criticism might be missing the bigger picture. When it comes to the NFL draft, predicting success is anything but an exact science. So much depends on fit, the team's scheme, coaching, and the environment a player lands in. History is full of players who were doubted early but developed into stars. Take Colton Miller, for example. Once written off as one of the league's worst tackles, he transformed into a top 15 offensive lineman. Clearly, the Raiders saw something they loved in Beck. If they believed he wouldn't be available at their next pick, they had every reason to pull the trigger when they did. After all, draft boards vary across teams, and sometimes it's smarter to reach slightly for a player you're high on rather than settle for your 12th choice at the position. And let's be honest, the difference between the 58th and 68th overall pick is minimal. It's unlikely 10 spots dramatically change a player's value. In the end, it only takes one team to believe in a player's potential. Last year gave us plenty of reminders that projections don't always match reality. Just look at Brock Bowers, who many viewed as a top talent but slipped past the first dozen picks. So while some scouts question the Raiders' second-round choice, it's worth remembering that the real verdict will come on the field. And no matter what the draft experts say, the Raiders are betting that Jack Beck will prove them right. Another important factor to consider is that the Raiders didn't select Jack Beck with their original 38th overall pick. Instead, they traded back twice, eventually landing Beck at number 58. That's a calculated move. The Raiders clearly believed they could still secure Beck later in the draft, and they were right. Of course, trading back meant missing out on a wide receiver like Luther Burden, who was taken 39th overall by the Chicago Bears, pairing up with new head coach Ben Johnson. It's fair to wonder if Burden might have been the better choice at receiver. But here's the key point. Trading back opened up more opportunities for Las Vegas. Without those moves, they might not have landed players like Dante Thornton in the fourth round or Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers in the third. When you look at the draft as a whole, those extra picks could prove just as valuable. The Raiders' faith in Beck makes sense within this strategy. They believe he fits their offensive system and can develop alongside veterans like Jakobi Meyers. Trusting the team's leadership, including GM JohnSpytek, offensive mind Chip Kelly, and veteran coach PeteCarroll, seems like the right call. The Raiders approached this draft by selecting solid players as they became available. While not every pick will win universal praise, overall, Spytek deserves credit for his first draft class. Now, shifting gears, there's an important situation developing around the Raiders' defensive line. Just before the draft, reports emerged that defensive tackle Christian Wilkins was seen wearing a walking boot, a concerning sign. Wilkins, who suffered a Jones fracture in his foot last season and underwent off-season surgery, had initially appeared to be progressing well. During the early off-season program, photos showed him without the boot, and optimism was high. However, insider Vic Tafur reported that Wilkins was back in the boot, raising questions about his recovery. That report was followed by another from Tony Pauline, who previously indicated in March that Wilkins might need an additional procedure on the foot. Pauline has since doubled down on that claim, even after the draft, suggesting the issue hasn't been fully resolved. This adds important context to the Raiders' decision-making. Addressing the interior defensive line in the draft now looks like a proactive move in light of Wilkins' uncertain status. If another surgery is needed, Las Vegas will be glad they added reinforcements up front. The Raiders made a smart move this offseason by adding two potential interior pass rushers in Hemingway and JJ, but one major storyline continues to hover over the team: the health of defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. Recently, the Raiders shared images showing Wilkins working out, hitting the sled without wearing a walking boot. That's encouraging. But when you take a step back and look at the full picture, it's clear Wilkins isn't fully out of the woods just yet. Wilkins is still managing recovery from a Jones fracture in his foot, the same injury that sidelined him last season. Reports have surfaced over the past few weeks, including one from Vic Tafur, indicating that Wilkins was spotted wearing the boot again at times. Tony Pauline has gone even further, suggesting that Wilkins might still need another procedure and could potentially miss part of the upcoming season. That said, we're still early in the offseason calendar. It's only May, with 2.5 months left before training camp begins. There's plenty of time for Wilkins' foot to heal, and the hope is that surgery won't be necessary. While a Jones fracture can be tricky, Wilkins is still young and has a good chance to recover fully. The Raiders need him on the field. While the rookie defensive tackles they drafted offer long-term potential, they aren't expected to match Wilkins' level right away. He's arguably the team's second most important defender, and his impact when healthy is massive. Right now, we're likely to see an up-and-down rehab process. Some days Wilkins will be out of the boot and moving well. Other days he may step back and rest. That's a normal part of recovery. So, while social media may be buzzing with concerns, the big-picture expectation is that Wilkins should be ready when camp kicks off. Reports from outlets like The Athletic have echoed that optimism. Switching gears, another notable topic has emerged involving former Raiders running back Josh Jacobs. Jacobs recently opened up about his departure from the team, offering some insight into how things ended under the previous regime of Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. It's clear Jacobs went through a tough stretch, and many fans were critical of him on social media during that time. Hearing his perspective now brings some much-needed context and shows that there was a lot more happening behind the scenes than people realized. In a revealing recent interview, Josh Jacobs opened up about how his time with the Raiders came to an end. And while he didn't mention former general manager Dave Ziegler by name, it was clear who he was talking about. Jacobs repeatedly referred to the people in charge, making it clear he wasn't pointing fingers at owner Mark Davis, who, by all accounts, lets his football operations staff handle the decision-making. From the moment Ziegler arrived, many questioned his leadership. Sure, the Raiders pulled off the blockbuster trade for Davante Adams, but the draft classes under Ziegler raised plenty of eyebrows. Picks like Dylan Parham in the 3rd round and Zamir White in the 4th brought mixed results. And who can forget the following draft, when the Raiders took Tyree Wilson, a selection that drew plenty of skepticism. But what really stung was how Ziegler handled relationships inside the building, something Jacobs shed light on. Jacobs explained that after his breakout season, when he led the NFL in rushing, he was hoping for a fair contract. The Raiders reportedly offered him $10 million, but Jacobs asked for performance incentives that could have bumped that number higher if he hit certain marks, things like rushing yards, yards per carry, or receptions. The response from the front office was a firm no. Jacobs described how, just before the season, he was considering a holdout. He recalled sitting in the parking lot with Max Crosby, talking things over when a member of the front office came outside, someone Jacobs strongly hinted was Ziegler, and tried to feel him out on whether he was ready to accept the deal. Jacobs also shared that, in his view, Ziegler was leaking negative stories to the media throughout the process, shaping the public narrative against him. Looking back, Jacobs expressed some regret about not making his own statement during the standoff, which could have given fans a clearer picture of what was happening behind the scenes. It's easy to understand Jacobs' frustration. He was willing to take a team-friendly deal if it included reasonable incentives, but the front office wasn't interested. In the end, it's no surprise Jacobs chose to move on, especially given the cold handling from the previous regime. It's another example of why leadership at the top matters just as much as talent on the field. There's always been a big debate around the NFL about paying running backs, and I've been pretty clear on where I stand. You don't always have to pay them. If you scout well and invest properly, you can usually find talent at that position. Take Ashton Jeanty, for example. I believe he could end up being even better than Josh Jacobs down the line. That's no knock on Jacobs, who's still a top 10 back in the league, but it shows how replaceable the position can be if you draft and develop the right way. That said, sometimes you should pay your guys, and looking back, I think the Raiders made a mistake not keeping Jacobs. A 3-year, $36 million deal would have made sense for both sides. Nobody would have complained about that, especially when you look at some of the money the Raiders have paid to players who didn't even stick around or make an impact. It's frustrating when you see resources wasted, especially on the heels of how poorly the last regime handled things. It's actually wild to think about how some people even land general manager jobs in the NFL. Dave Ziegler was far from the only questionable hire around the league. We see GMs getting fired every year because they weren't ready for the job. Thankfully, the Raiders moved on, and I have to say, I really like what Tom Telesco and new GM JohnSpytek have done so far. We'll see how it all plays out, but the early signs are promising. On a lighter note, let's talk about rookie Brock Bowers. Some fans noticed he wasn't at the Raiders' voluntary offseason program, but here's the real story, and it's nothing negative. Bowers is back at the University of Georgia finishing his finance degree. That's something to respect. While I personally don't think a degree is a game changer, and I say that as someone with a finance degree myself, I love that Bowers values his education. Someday, when he has a family, he can tell his kids he finished what he started, and that can be a powerful message. If you're going to miss voluntary workouts, getting your degree is one of the best reasons. The Raiders are in the early stages of their offseason, and they'll take a break soon before regrouping in a few weeks. Once we hit training camp, things are going to pick up fast. Roster moves, trades, injuries, hopefully none, and a flood of headlines. Last year, it was Malcolm Kuntz's ACL injury. This year, maybe it's something positive. A trade for a big name like Jalen Ramsey, perhaps? We'll have to wait and see. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit that thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time with more Raiders updates.